They say some moments haunt you forever. It's been 2 years since that night. 2 years since the knock that shattered my marriage and changed who I thought I was. The rain was soft, like a whisper on the windows. The house was still. My husband had called earlier, working late again. No explanation. No warmth. Just distance. I was alone. Not just in the house. In the marriage. In myself. I remember sitting on the couch. Blanket over my legs. TV on, but I wasn't watching. A half-full glass of wine going warm beside me. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a second skin. Then came the knock. Just once. Then again. Not urgent. Not frantic. Just there. I froze. Checked the time. Late. Too late. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was him. Derek. My husband's best friend. He stood in the rain. No umbrella. Water dripping from his jacket. Hands in his pockets. Eyes heavy, like he was carrying something he couldn't put down. I opened the door. He didn't smile. He just looked at me. And I looked back. He said my name. Quietly. Like it meant something. I stepped aside. He walked in. And I closed the door behind him. That was it. No kiss. No touch. Just a moment. A moment I've replayed 1,000 times. I never imagined he would be the one to fill the silence my husband left behind. But that night, something shifted. And I knew. Nothing would ever be the same. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. You won't want to miss what happened next. Let me start from the beginning. My name doesn't matter. But what does, is how I started fading long before that knock came. I've been married to Marcus for 7 years. In the beginning, we were inseparable. He made me feel like the only woman in the room, like I was someone worth fighting for. But something shifted, slowly, quietly. Like a light dimming in a room, one bulb at a time, until you're sitting in the dark and don't even realize it. At first, it was small things. Late nights at work. Missed dinners. Forgetting to ask how my day was. Then it became normal. I stopped waiting up. Stopped asking where he was. Stopped pretending I wasn't hurt. Our home looked perfect from the outside. 2 cars in the driveway. A trimmed lawn. Curtains always drawn neatly. But inside, it felt like I was living next to a stranger. We moved around each other like ghosts sharing space, but not life. And that's where Derek came in. He and Marcus had been friends since college. Derek was the opposite of Marcus, warm, loud, funny. The kind of man who noticed things. Like when I cut my hair. Or changed the curtains. Or bought a new candle for the living room. He always had a compliment ready. Always made me feel real. Present. Visible. At first, he came by with Marcus. They'd have a drink, watch a game, laugh like boys do. I'd bring them snacks, smile politely, and fade into the background like I'd grown used to doing. But then, slowly, the pattern changed. Derek started dropping by on his own. At first, he said he was just in the neighborhood. Then he said Marcus had asked him to check in while he worked late. Sometimes, he'd bring food. Other times, just conversation. And I let him. Because it felt good to be asked how I was. To laugh again. To be looked at like I mattered. I told myself it was innocent. That he was just a friend. That I was being dramatic. But I knew better. There was a night not long before that night when he stopped by unannounced. He stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. I hadn't even mentioned I liked the vanilla blend. But somehow he knew. We sat in the kitchen and talked about everything but the elephant in the room. And then, just as he was leaving, his hand brushed against mine. It was barely a touch. But it stayed with me for days. I told myself it was nothing. But deep down, a part of me felt something bloom. And that scared me more than anything. There was something about the way he looked at me that night. Like he saw through everything. Like he was waiting for me to admit the truth I didn't want to face. It made my stomach flutter. And my heart sink. All at once. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't invisible. And I didn't know whether to run from that feeling or fall into it. And that was the beginning of the unraveling. It was a Thursday evening. The kind of evening that feels longer than it should. Sky heavy with clouds, air thick like something was waiting to happen. I had made dinner again. Marcus hadn't called, so I assumed he'd be home late. But right as I set the table, my phone buzzed. His name flashed on the screen. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at it. Like maybe, if I waited, the message would change. But it didn't. Sorry, babe. Got pulled into another meeting. Don't wait up. No, I miss you. No, how was your day? Just work. Again. I sighed, turned the oven off, and sat down alone. The kitchen lights flickered for a second. Then came the sound of rain, gentle at first, then steady. The kind that taps on the windows like it knows you're alone. I poured myself a glass of wine. The kind I usually saved for weekends. I sat on the couch, pulled the blanket over my legs, and let the TV play something I wasn't really watching. And then, the doorbell rang. I froze. Not because I was scared, but because deep down I already knew who it was. I walked slowly to the door, heart beating just a little too fast. And when I looked through the peephole, I saw him. Derek. Standing in the rain. No umbrella, jacket damp. Holding a brown paper bag in one hand. He smiled, softly, and mouthed dinner. I didn't open the door right away. I stood there, forehead resting against the wood, asking myself if this was a good idea. But when I finally opened it, I didn't stop him from walking in. He kicked off his shoes, set the bag on the counter, and looked around like he belonged there. Like this wasn't the first time. And maybe it wasn't. I figured you'd be alone, he said. I didn't respond. He pulled out 2 containers, Chinese food. My favorite. He poured us each a glass of wine, like it was routine. Like he knew the cabinet without asking. The rain outside picked up. Thunder rumbled low and lazy in the distance. And the lights flickered again. We sat at the table, eating, talking, laughing more than we should have. It felt easy. Too easy. At some point, he reached for the speaker on the counter and played some music. Soft jazz. Old school. Something warm. And that's when the conversation shifted. He leaned back in his chair, took a sip of wine, and looked at me with a kind of softness that caught me off guard. Remember that trip to Cape Cod? He said. I blinked. Cape Cod? Yeah, he smiled. That time we all went. You, me, Marcus. That little beach house with the broken hot tub. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. God, yes. And the raccoon that stole our snacks. He chuckled, eyes never leaving mine. I remember thinking back then, you had the most beautiful laugh. Still do. I froze. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what was happening. And I didn't know if I wanted to stop it. The music filled the silence between us. A saxophone whispering truths I wasn't ready to speak. I reached for my wine glass. He reached too. And then, his hand brushed mine. It was barely a touch, but it lit something in me that I hadn't felt in a long, long time. And I didn't pull away. I should have. But I didn't. Not because I wanted him, but because I needed something, anything, that made me feel like I was still alive. And in that moment, I was no longer just a wife. I was a woman, standing on the edge of a line I never thought I'd cross. I should have pulled my hand back. I should have said something, anything, to break the moment, to remind both of us where we stood. But I didn't, and I've thought about that night 1,000 times since. Not just what happened, but what didn't. Because that small, fleeting touch, it opened a door I'd kept locked for years. And the air on the other side, it didn't feel dangerous. It felt warm. It felt like breath after drowning. I remember just sitting there, my fingers still tingling from where he'd touched me, and my thoughts spiraling. Why am I craving this? Why does this feel like relief, instead of guilt? I didn't want Derek. Not really. What I wanted was something much simpler, much lonelier than desire. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to feel like I mattered to someone. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like Marcus saw me at all. And it didn't happen overnight. It was slow, gradual, cruel in how quiet it was. One missed dinner turned into a dozen. One forgotten kiss goodnight became a year of sleeping back to back. He started coming home later, leaving earlier. And when he was home, he wasn't really there. I used to light candles at dinner. He stopped noticing. I wore the dress he once said made me glow. He didn't even look up from his phone. Then came my birthday. I waited all day, told myself he was planning something. Even made my favorite cake. He came home with grocery bags and a tired look. Set them down on the counter, kissed me on the forehead, and asked what we were having for dinner. That was the first time I cried in the shower just to keep it quiet. I didn't want him to hear, didn't want to give him the burden of my sadness. But it stayed with me. Every quiet night. Every untouched plate. Every time I reached for him in bed and felt only cool sheets. I stopped trying after a while. Stopped dressing up. Stopped hoping. And then Derek started showing up. At first, it felt like nothing. Like an old friend checking in. But it grew into something else. He asked how I was. Not just in passing. He listened when I answered. He noticed when I changed the throw pillows. Complimented the way I laughed. He'd tell stories that made me forget the ache for a while. And every time he left, I'd sit in the silence afterward, trying to convince myself it was harmless. It's just a conversation, I told myself. It's just comfort. Just company. But deep down, I knew better. Because something had shifted. And you always feel it, don't you? The before and the after. Before, I was just a lonely wife. But after that night, after that touch, I became something else. Someone else. I started looking at the door when the rain came. Started checking my phone more. Started wondering if he'd stop by again. And what I'd do if he did. Not because I planned to cross a line, but because I already had. In my heart. In my thoughts. And no one tells you how heavy emotional infidelity can feel. How it settles into your chest like a secret you can't stop feeding. I'd lie in bed next to Marcus, wide awake, wondering how he couldn't feel how far we'd drifted. And maybe that's what broke me the most. Not that Derek touched my hand, but that my husband hadn't touched my soul in so long, I forgot what it felt like. And that realization? It didn't make me feel powerful. It didn't make me feel brave. It made me feel hollow. Because the woman I used to be, the woman who believed in love, in loyalty, in forever, she was slipping away. And I didn't know how to pull her back. After that night, things didn't go back to normal. Not really. We never talked about the hand touch. Never even looked at it directly. But it was there, in the pauses between sentences, in the silences that stretched a little too long. It hung in the air like perfume, faint, but undeniable. Derek started coming by more often, sometimes with Marcus, like nothing had changed. They'd laugh on the couch while I brought them drinks, and I'd pretend to be focused on the glasses, the coasters, the tray, anything but him. But I could feel his eyes on me. Not in a disrespectful way. In a knowing way. Like we shared something that neither of us had dared name. And then there were the visits without Marcus. Harmless things. Just dropping by to return a charger. Just wanted to see if you needed help with the garden. Marcus said I should pick up his jacket. Always a reason. Always a smile. Always that space between us that felt too small for comfort and too wide for denial. And I let it continue. Because I was starving for connection. And Derek, he made me feel like I was still someone worth listening to, worth looking at, worth waiting on. Then came the weekend Marcus left for a work trip. 3 days. He packed the night before in silence, barely kissed my cheek goodbye that morning. No check-in texts. No, I love you. Just as usual. Absence. That evening I made dinner. Not because I was hungry, but because part of me was hoping. hoping the doorbell would ring, hoping the rain would come again, hoping he would show up. And he did. Derek knocked around 8. Said Marcus had forgotten some files. Held up a folder like proof. But neither of us pretended it was just about that. He stepped inside, took off his shoes, and said the house smelled amazing. I had made lemon butter chicken. I hadn't cooked that in months. Maybe because Marcus didn't like lemon. But Derek did. We ate in the kitchen this time. Just the two of us. The lights low. Music playing softly from my phone on the windowsill. And I had worn something different. Not fancy. Just softer. A loose sweater, a fitted skirt. Something that made me feel pretty again. I didn't think much of it at the time. But now I know better. I wanted him to notice. And he did. This is really good, he said between bites. I smiled. Thanks. I haven't cooked like this in a while. He looked up, eyes searching mine. Why not? I shrugged. No one to cook for. You've got Marcus. I laughed, but it was empty. Do I? He didn't answer. The silence after that said more than words ever could. We finished eating, and I started cleaning up. He stood beside me, drying the plates, handing me glasses to rinse. It felt domestic. Too natural. Then he said it. You know, I admire you. I glanced over. For what? For holding it together. For staying kind. For still laughing, even when you've got every reason not to. My hands froze in the sink. Don't do that, I said quietly. Do what? Make it harder than it already is. He didn't respond. Just kept drying the dishes. But he moved a little closer. I could feel the heat of him at my side. Not touching, but close enough to feel present. In a way Marcus hadn't been in years. I loaded the last plate into the dishwasher and turned to grab the soap. And when I turned around, he was right behind me. So close, I could feel his breath on my cheek. So close, it stopped mine. The kitchen was still. Too still. The kind of quiet that wraps around you like a secret. The music had faded into a soft hum, then into nothing. The only sound left was the soft clink of a glass against the counter, the hush of our breaths. He was standing so close. Too close. I didn't move. I couldn't. His eyes held mine like he was asking for something without saying a word. And I knew, whatever this was, it wasn't just in my head. He reached up slowly. Not fast. Not urgent. Just deliberate. His fingers brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. Gentle. Intimate. And I didn't stop him. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull back. I let him touch me like I had wanted to be touched for so long. I looked at him. Not at his mouth. Not at his hands. At his eyes. And in them I saw everything I was missing. Not passion. But presence. Real, raw, intentional presence. And in that second, 1,000 thoughts rushed through my mind. Marcus. Our wedding day. The first time he told me he loved me. The years I spent trying to be enough for a man who had already checked out. The nights I cried myself to sleep while he lay inches away, unaware. The silence. The cold. The empty dinners. The missed calls. The forgotten birthdays. I thought about our vows. About promises whispered under white lights and hopeful tears. About forever. And then I thought about the me I had become, quiet, tired, invisible. A version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. And before I could stop it, before I could think it through, he kissed me. Softly, barely there. Like a question. And I kissed him back. Like an answer I had buried for far too long. It wasn't wild. It wasn't reckless. It was something else entirely. Something that cracked open the loneliness I'd been hiding. Something that felt like truth, even though I knew it was wrong. His hands didn't roam. They stayed at my waist. Respectful. Still. But his mouth on mine, it was like breathing after holding it in for too many years. And then it was over. Just like that. He pulled away first. His eyes wide. Searching. Ashamed. I shouldn't have, he stammered. I said nothing. I couldn't. My lips were still trembling. Not from desire, but from everything else that moment had brought to the surface. I stepped back, turned away, stared at the sink like it had answers. My heart was racing, and my body was still humming, but my soul, it was sinking. Because I knew what we had just done. Even if no clothes had come off. Even if it lasted less than a minute. We had crossed a line. One I never imagined myself crossing. One that once felt impossible. Until it wasn't. And just then, my phone rang. I froze. The name on the screen? Marcus. I looked at Derek. He looked back at me, his expression a mix of panic and guilt. And for a second, just a second, I wondered if he knew. My hand was trembling as I picked up the phone. I cleared my throat, forced a breath, and answered. Hey, I said, trying to sound normal. Soft, controlled. Like my heart wasn't in pieces. Like I hadn't just kissed his best friend. Marcus's voice came through the speaker, calm, casual, almost warm. Hey, babe. Just checking in. You good? You good? The words hit harder than they should have. I swallowed. Yeah, I'm fine. Just finishing up dinner. He told me he was going to bed soon. Long day. Early morning. Said he missed me. I wanted to believe him. I lied and said I missed him too. And then I hung up. Just like that. I turned around. But Derek was already walking toward the door. He didn't say a word. Didn't ask me if I was okay. Didn't try to explain. He just opened the door and left. And he didn't look back. The moment the door clicked shut, the silence roared louder than ever. I stood in the kitchen, not moving, not breathing, not even thinking, just feeling. The air was still warm from his presence, but I felt cold. So cold. I walked to the bathroom, turned on the light, and caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Eyes glassy, lips still tingling, and something else underneath it all, shame, but not just shame. It was grief. For the woman I used to be. The version of me who would have never let this happen. Who have I become? The words slipped out before I could stop them. And the scariest part? I didn't know the answer. The next morning felt like waking up inside someone else's life. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't. I went through the motions. Coffee, laundry, dishes, all while replaying every second of the night before. I checked my phone more times than I care to admit. No messages from Derek. Not even a read receipt on the one I'd sent. Can we talk? The silence between us felt louder than any confession. And then Marcus came home. He walked through the door carrying flowers. Flowers. He kissed me on the forehead, just like he used to. Asked how I'd been. Said he missed my cooking. I watched him like a stranger. Because something was off. He was too kind. Too present. Like a man trying to make up for something. I caught myself staring at him while he spoke. Studying him. Searching for cracks in the surface. And the more I watched, the more I wondered. Was it guilt? Was it guilt in his voice? Was it guilt that brought him home early? That made him look me in the eyes for the first time in weeks? I wanted to ask him, but how could I? Hey, Marcus, did you cheat on me? Because I kissed your best friend while you were gone. No. The words stayed locked in my throat. So I smiled, cooked him dinner, laughed at the right moments, played the role I'd learned too well. But inside, I was unraveling. Because I couldn't stop thinking about Derek. About the way he looked at me. The way his silence spoke louder than any apology. And I couldn't stop thinking about how alive I felt. Even if it was for all the wrong reasons. That kiss didn't fix me. It didn't make the emptiness go away. But it did remind me that I still felt something. And that realization haunted me more than anything else. Because if I still had the capacity to feel, then why had I gone so long pretending I didn't need to? And why? Why did I suddenly feel like Marcus might be hiding something too? Something I hadn't seen coming. Did I cheat? Or did I break? I've asked myself that question more times than I can count. Not out loud. Just in the quiet moments, when the world is still and I can't distract myself with laundry or dinner or small talk. It's not as simple as people make it sound. Cheating. It's easy to judge from the outside, to draw hard lines, to say what you would or wouldn't do. But inside a lonely heart, those lines blur. And you start confusing attention with affection, comfort with connection, presence with love. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to betray my marriage. I didn't plan for anything to happen. It just built. In the pauses, in the glances, in the moments that felt too small to matter until they did. The worst part? I still don't know if Marcus suspects. He hasn't said anything, hasn't changed the way he looks at me. If anything, he's more attentive now than he's been in years. Making dinner reservations, asking me about my day, touching me in the kitchen the way he used to, and it's driving me insane. Because part of me wonders if he knows. If he felt the shift the same way I did. If he's trying to reel me back in before I slip away completely. But the other part? The other part wonders if he's hiding something too. Maybe his sudden attention isn't guilt-free. Maybe he feels what I feel, only from the other side. I started watching him more, listening carefully to his words, noticing the moments when he reached for his phone and turned the screen just slightly away from me, noticing how his smile sometimes faltered when I asked where he'd been. I began wondering, do I want him to find out? Would that make me feel less guilty? Would it even the score? Would it give me an excuse to stop pretending? I don't know. But I do know this isn't the marriage I signed up for. This isn't the life I thought I'd be living. And somewhere between the vows and the silence, we both stopped showing up. I thought betrayal was a one-sided act, something one person did to another. But what if it's not? What if betrayal can grow in the space between two people? Quietly, steadily, until it becomes the only thing left between them? What if we've both been betraying each other? In our own ways. In silence. I sat with that thought for days. Didn't reach out to Derek. Didn't speak of him. Tried to convince myself it didn't mean anything. But it did. Because it changed the way I saw everything. My marriage. Myself. Even Marcus. I kept checking my phone even when I didn't want to. Like a part of me was waiting for permission to feel something again. And then one evening, just as I was setting the table, my phone buzzed. It was him. Derek. One message. No emojis. No explanation. Just 4 words. We need to talk. Have you ever made a choice? Not because you wanted to, but because you didn't know how to say no? Not to someone else, but to yourself. That moment in the kitchen, that kiss, it didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like breathing after holding it in for too long. It felt like waking up in a life I didn't recognize and finally whispering, I'm still here. Was I wrong for letting that moment happen? Or was I just human? Aching to feel seen again. To be remembered. To feel like I wasn't disappearing in plain sight. I don't expect easy answers. I don't even know what I'd say if I were listening to someone else tell this story. But maybe you do. So tell me in the comments, was this betrayal? Or was it just a cry for connection? In the wrong place, at the wrong time? If stories like this stir your soul, if they make you feel something deep inside like this video, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We unravel the human heart. Desire doesn't knock on your door wearing warning signs. It doesn't arrive with flashing lights or dramatic music. Sometimes, it comes dressed as a friend, carrying wine, old stories, and all the forgotten parts of yourself you thought were buried. It doesn't always ask for permission. It just slips in through the cracks, through the empty spaces, through the silences that have been growing louder for years. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know what I'll say to Derek. Or what I'll tell Marcus, if anything at all. But I do know this, it only takes one moment to redraw the map of who you thought you were. One quiet kiss. One glance held too long. One lonely night that opens a door you can't close again. So the next time someone shows up at your door late, unexpected, uninvited. Before you open it, ask yourself something. Not, do I trust them? Not, what do they want? But this, am I lonely? Or am I lost? Because sometimes, that's the real question. And the answer? It changes everything.